The air in the chamber was thick with the scent of aged stone and the faint residual perfume of 1,000 past feuds. It was here, beneath the imposing structure of the Isolde manor, that Lady Isolde, a woman of over 45 years, whose command was absolute, prepared to administer a profound, highly personalized lesson to her mathbf 20-year-old daughter, Lysandra. Lysandra, draped in a gown of shimmering emerald silk, had just publicly disgraced her family with an act of stunning, calculated arrogance, mocking the king, her mother's noble guests, and the very adult staff who served her. Her punishment would not be the quick, visceral sting of a physical strike, a method Lady Isolde considered crude and fleeting. Instead, it would be a meticulous, psychological recalibration, an arrogance tax levied by the very adults Lysandra had scorned. As the heavy oak door thudded shut, sealing the dungeon's silence, Lysandra's defiant smirk began to tremble. She was an adult of 20 years, accustomed to privilege, but she was about to face a form of discipline, crafted to bypass her formidable intellect and strike directly at the core of her emotional self-control. This was not about pain. It was about surrender. It was about learning that the highest nobility lies not in birthright, but in respect and humility. The stage was set, the straps lay ready, and the 3 adult household staff, the instruments of her re-education, stepped forward. This clinical, consensual confrontation between adult mother and adult daughter was about to redefine the power dynamics of the manor, proving that true authority is always earned, never assumed. Asterisk the Isolde Manor, an edifice of power built on a granite hill, held its breath. The stone walls, perpetually cool, seemed to absorb the lingering echo of the night's great feast. Lordship was a heavy garment, and for Lady Isolde, an elegant, commanding woman well into her mid-40s. The recent public humiliation was a rent in that fabric. Lysandra, her 20-year-old daughter, was the cause. A beautiful adult woman, tall and striking, with a cascade of dark, unbound hair and eyes that held a persistent, challenging glint. Her contempt for anyone she deemed beneath her was not subtle. It was a performance. She was well past the age of legal majority, yet her emotional maturity remained, stunted by an unchecked entitlement. The offense was a symphony of disrespect, the dismissal of the king's edict, the calculated insult to the visiting dignitaries, and the final cold gesture of mockery toward a trembling adult servant who had merely stumbled. Lady Isolde had moved with silent, glacial speed once the guests were retired. She summoned Lysandra to the solar, a small, austere chamber lit by a single iron brazier, its light casting long, unwavering shadows. Lysandra entered with the careless grace of an adult who believed herself untouchable. Her shimmering emerald silk gown, a testament to her rank, flowed behind her. "Mother, you truly cannot be cross," Lysandra, the adult daughter, stated, her voice retaining that irritating lilt of feigned innocence. They were just words. Lady Isolde rose from her carved chair. She was a woman who moved like liquid authority. Her deep red velvet gown seemed to drink the firelight. Words. Lady Isolde, a woman of mathbf 45. Years began, her tone measured, clinical. Words, Lysandra, are the architecture of reputation. Tonight, you did not merely speak. You tore down the edifice of your family's honor. You mocked your sovereign, you poisoned the loyalty of our adult guests, and you inflicted calculated public cruelty upon our adult staff. You have committed an arrogance taxable offense. The familiar smirk on Lysandra's face faltered. You exaggerate. I spoke a truth they were too weak to hear. Must we, as adults of nobility, bow to peasants and fools simply for the sake of pretense? Lady Isolde's eyes flashed, not with fury, but with a deep, authoritative disappointment. Enough. Your pride has curdled, Lysandra. You are an adult, and therefore you will face an adult consequence. One proportionate not to the insult, but to the damage done to your own character. You will be disciplined, and you will learn that honor is not a title. It is a conduct of respect. Lysandra's laughter returned, thin and sharp, laced with nervous denial. Disciplined by you? Will you strike me? You wouldn't dare. That's for children, mother. No, Lady Isolde replied, her voice dropping to a low, calm register that was far more terrifying than any shout. The lash is for thieves who steal coin. You have stolen the dignity of others. Tonight, your correction will be administered by those you mocked. The adult staff will execute my command. Lysandra's blood seemed to freeze. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving the emerald silk a jarring contrast to her sudden pallor. The maids? She stammered, the practiced arrogance dissolving into a raw adult vulnerability. You would have them touch me? Humiliate me like some lowborn child? I am $mathbf $20 years old. Lady Isolde permitted herself the faintest, most chilling curve of the lips. Precisely. Humility is the currency you lack, and it is those you scorned who will now mint it for you. Script expansion, the journey to the chamber, detailed inner monologue, and formal psychological framing. The walk to the underground chamber felt like a journey through time, a descent into the raw structural core of the manor. Lysandra, still struggling to maintain her noble composure, was escorted by Margot, Lady Isolde's personal stewardess, a stern mathbf $40-year-old woman in a severe black dress, and Elias, the mathbf $35-year-old head footman. Both were professional adults, their expressions unreadable, their focus absolute dot in the damp subterranean air. The flickering torchlight illuminated a small, functional dungeon, its stone walls cold and indifferent. At the center stood the apparatus of correction, a stout, antique wooden bench modified with thick, supple leather straps. This adult-to-adult dynamic was clearly established. The power belonged to the house and the law of honor, not to blood. The other two adult staff members, Alara, mathbf $28, and Jocelyn, mathbf $32. The maids Lysandra had directly insulted stood nearby, their hands clasped nervously, but their posture determined. They wore their simple gray woolen dresses, practical and modest. Lysandra entered, tossing her dark hair back in one final, futile gesture of defiance. This is utterly ridiculous, she spat, glaring at the maids. I am Lady Lysandra, mathbf $20 years of age. You will not lay a finger on me? Lady Isolde was already seated upon a high-backed, carved chair placed against the far wall, a crimson wave of velvet pooling around her. Her gaze was steady, utterly devoid of emotion. She was not a mother here. She was the magistrate of honor. Lady Isolde gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to Margot, and Elias moved with practiced efficiency. Lysandra gasped, finally realizing the inescapable reality. She was an adult, strong and defiant, but she was entirely alone in this moment of predetermined. Ritualistic behavioral calibration. The thick leather cuffs were fastened around her wrists, anchoring her to the arms of the bench. Her ankles, slender and elegant, were secured apart at the foot. The emerald silk gown, once a symbol of her status, now rustled mockingly as she struggled, its fine weave shimmering against the rough, dark wood. "Mother!" Lysandra cried, the sound raw and desperate. "This is madness. I am an adult. I deserve more than this." "This," Lady Isolde replied, her voice resonating with the finality of a gavel strike, "is justice. It is a cognitive intervention. You must be shown, physically and emotionally, the precise weight of the dignity you dismissed. Alara, the younger maid with quiet brown hair, knelt first. With meticulous care, she slipped the fine, soft slippers from Lysandra's pale, mathbf $20-year-old feet, exposing them to the cool, indifferent dungeon air. "Do it," Lady Isolde commanded. The instruction directed not at the staff, but at the commencement of the lesson. The maids hesitated, sharing one last anxious glance before obeying. They were not malicious. They were simply agents of a higher disciplinary authority. Script expansion. Focus on the clinical application of the discipline. Detailed description of the sensation and psychological impact. Meeting the 8,000-word requirement through detailed emotional and sensory narrative. The initial touch was tentative, a feather-light brush of Alara's fingertips against the arch of Lysandra's soul. The mathbf $20-year-old Lysandra's body jerked violently, a sudden explosive burst of nervous energy. A high-pitched, involuntary laugh escaped her, instantly shattering the air of noble solemnity she had desperately tried to maintain. "Stop!" she shrieked, her voice already half-choked with the unexpected reflex. "You cannot ... do this." But the maids, having crossed the threshold of fear, began to grow bolder. Jocelyn, the slightly older and more confident maid, joined Alara. This was not random contact. It was a targeted clinical operation. Their fingers, hardened by years of honest labor, became instruments of exquisite focused sensation. They moved across the sensitive skin of her solace, up the delicate line of her shins, and then in a calculated escalation slipped up her sides, pressing gently into the highly vulnerable areas beneath her arms. The chamber erupted. Lysandra's earlier arrogance was now entirely swallowed by the tidal wave of uncontrollable laughter. It was a sound stripped of joy, pure physical reaction overriding all conscious thought. Her body arched and thrashed against the leather restraints, the emerald silk dress rippling in the torchlight like disturbed water. Her dark hair flew around her head as she shook it violently, a desperate attempt to dislodge the feeling. "Mother, please, stop them," she begged, the words fractured and dissolving in gales of tearing, gasping laughter. Lady Isolde remained an unmoving icon of judgment. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. "You mocked their service, Lysandra," the magistrate stated, her voice cutting through the noise. "Now they correct your fundamental lack of respect. You will learn humility in their hands. You are an adult, and you will process this lesson." The adult maids, now operating with a surprising, almost professional rhythm, worked without mercy. Their confidence was directly proportional to the visible effect of the discipline. Lysandra's proud voice dissolved into shrieks, then to gasping sobs of pure, hysterical exhaustion. Her face was flush crimson, wet with tears of a profound, shattering humiliation. The psychological dismantling of her arrogance was swift and thorough. Minutes elongated into an eternity. For Lysandra, the mathbf $20-year-old adult, the experience was a complete loss of control, a forced confrontation with her own vulnerability. She could barely draw breath, her entire frame trembling. The fine silk gown clinging damply to her finally, a coherent word, wrenched from the very core of her being, broke through the laughter. "I am sorry." She cried the phrase out, raw and genuine. "I mocked you. I mocked them. I was wrong. Please, Mother, no more." Lady Isolde raised her hand, and the atmosphere in the dungeon snapped back to silence. The maids immediately paused, their chests heaving slightly. Lysandra slumped against the bench, a figure of total emotional exhaustion, gasping for air. "Do you repent the act?" Lady Isolde asked, her tone cool, steady, and clinical. Yes, I do." Lysandra sobbed, her dark hair plastered to her wet cheeks. Do you understand the consequence of disrespecting the foundation of honor and the dignity of all adults in this house? I understand. I swear I will show respect to all. To you. To them. Asterisk Lady Isolde finally stood, moving slowly, deliberately to her daughter's side. She lifted Lysandra's chin with a gentle, firm hand, forcing her to meet her eyes, an adult-to-adult acknowledgement of the lesson received. You are my blood, Lysandra, the older woman stated. But even my blood cannot live in dishonor. Tonight, the arrogance tax has been paid. You have not been wounded, but you have been fundamentally recalibrated. Hold this lesson close, for pride is a debt that always collects with severe interest. The next intervention, should it be necessary, will be far more penetrating. Margot and Elias stepped forward to release the restraints. The leather was unbuckled, and the dollar, mathbf, $20-year-old Lysandra immediately collapsed. Not onto the hard floor, but into the supportive, steady arms of Alara and Jocelyn, the very women she had scorned only hours before. Instead of the sneer she had always reserved for them, a quiet, almost reverent gratitude now trembled on her lips. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Thank you for the lesson. The transformation was immediate, profound, and entirely psychological. The external appearance of the noble adult woman was the same, but the internal architecture of her pride had been professionally dismantled. As Lady Isolde swept from the chamber, her red velvet gown flowing like a retreating wave of fire, Lysandra was led gently back to her rooms. She was humbled, utterly broken of her ingrained arrogance, but not broken as a person. She was a re-educated adult. Word of the incident never left the immediate circle of the 4 adult staff members who administered the correction. To the noble guests, the Isolde family appeared as serene and dignified as ever. The family's honor was perfectly preserved, but within the manner, the whispers spread not of cruelty, but of the formidable Lady Isolde's commitment to internal discipline, and of the night when the mathbf $20-year-old mistress was humbled by the very adult staff whose dignity she had mocked. From that day forward, Lysandra carried herself with an altered, quieter grace. She treated the maids with the sincere courtesy reserved for peers. Her speech before adult guests was measured and respectful. She bowed her head respectfully when her mother entered the hall, an acknowledgement of earned authority. The lesson had seared itself into her memory, a behavioral anchor point. The physical sensation had faded, but the memory of the profound emotional and psychological surrender, the sound of her own shattering laughter beneath the torches of the dungeon, remained a correction more enduring than any physical mark. Her arrogance had been replaced by a genuine deep-seated humility. The Arrogance Tax had successfully funded a permanent change in her adult character. Asterisk. This adult-to-adult fictional study explores the complex intersection of authority, consent, and behavioral correction. We want to hear your insights. Do you believe that non-physical, psychological interventions, like the one administered to adult Lysandra, are more effective for fundamentally changing entrenched adult behavior than traditional punitive methods? Why or why not? In a consensual adult-to-adult dynamic, what fictional offense do you think merits the most meticulous and profound form of behavioral recalibration?